So my name is Nada Buhendi, and I'm an Agile and Tech career coach. I've been in the technology industry for about 15 years, playing multiple roles, whether it was product manager, Agile coach, Scrum Master, business analyst, did configuration as a technology consultant, worked a lot with developers and people in tech. So have a very huge understanding of the role hands-on. And I ended up transitioning into becoming a career coach because I found there was a huge gap in the market in terms of helping us techies in terms of how to navigate our job search. And actually, one of the reasons, the biggest pivotal reason, was when I struggled for a whole year going to interviews and getting rejected, one interview after the other. It was so frustrating, and I spent a lot of time looking for answers, which eventually led me into becoming a career coach so that I can also help other people overcome that hurdle. So today's topic is how to convert interviews into offers without being an extrovert, staying up all night preparing, or turning into Obama, because we're not Obama, right? So we're not naturally born amazing public speakers. So I will be introducing a technique called the doctor frame. This is a technique that doctors use to establish authority and trust with their patients. And you can use it to influence hiring managers during interviews to hire you. So I'm going to get a little deeper into what this technique means. You'll discover today 6 simple shifts to convert interviews into offers faster than you thought without being an extrovert or staying up all night preparing. You'll also discover the key to gaining hiring managers' trust, because we all know that's important, and that's the reason they hire us, is if they trust us. And the single biggest mistake that prevents job seekers from converting an interview into an offer. So I'm going to share a little story about one of my clients. Her name is actually Amy, and she landed her offer as an Agile coach at one of the big consulting companies in the UK called PA Consulting. She did not have the official title as Agile coach, but because of her compelling storytelling and interviewing techniques, she ended up getting amazing feedback, and she ended up standing out from other candidates because of how consistently high and positive the feedback was. So I'm going to run you through the same process that I taught Amy in order for you to convert those interviews into offers. So I'm going to go through 2 pitfalls that a lot of us fall into as job seekers. So number 1 is what I call acting like the hero instead of the guide. What does that mean? So when you're going to an organization, you're guiding them with a problem. The organization is your customer. When you go in with the persona or the attitude of being a hero and talking a lot about your certifications, why you're awesome, that actually destroys the connection between you and the hiring manager. Instead, I recommend acting like the guide. So think Gandalf and Frodo. Gandalf created safety for Frodo. He created trust with Frodo. And that's the feeling that you want to create when you go into an interview. The second pitfall that people often make, because interviews are so scary and we get stage fright, is sometimes we sound like robots during the interview. And when that happens, you bore the interviewer, they stop listening to you, you don't engage them. We get so hyped trying to prove ourselves. And that ends up, doing the opposite effect. So sounding like a robot during interviews, can't communicate what makes you different, and trouble, and this is very important, trouble getting hiring managers to like you. The likability is very, very important, because at the end of the day, we work with people we like. So from a doctor perspective, would you pick a doctor you don't like? Even if the doctor is amazing, has PhDs, whatever, certifications, if you don't like them, then you won't feel comfortable having them treat you. So those are the two pitfalls. The truth is, you don't need to be an extrovert to be great at interviews. You just need to have prepared content. And guess what? Even Obama was trained to become a great public speaker. So can you. And being qualified for the job does not mean you will get the job if you can't influence employers. So those are the three important things that you need to remember. So let's dig into the doctor frame technique and what that means. You can take a screenshot of this if you like. These are the 6 things basically that comprise the doctor frame technique. Number 1, you need to have a trusted advisor mindset. So we talked about this a little bit. You're going into the interview as a doctor trying to fix a problem for the organization. 2, building rapport. You got to create that connection, that friendliness. When you go to a doctor's office, they don't say like, hey, how's it going? What's your problem? Like, oh my God, this guy is so weird. And instead, hey, how was your day? How are you doing? How are you feeling today? You're going to feel more relaxed and open up, right? So building that rapport is important. Identifying the bleeding neck problem. You got to know what the company is trying to solve. What is their bleeding neck problem? What is the reason behind them hiring you for this role? Number 4, structure creates consistency. So I'm going to go over that later on in more detail. Stories as proof of success. I'm sure you've been hearing this a lot, the art of storytelling. And this is a marketing technique as well that marketers use in commercials. They tell stories, etc. And I'll talk to you more about what that means. And training your public speaking muscle. So public speaking is actually a muscle that you can train and get better at. Okay, so let's talk about trusted advisor. So you're coming into an organization to help them. It's not about you, it's about the organization. And if you come in with the mindset where you want to help, you're actually going to feel more relaxed during the interview. And shift your focus away from, I really want to get this job, I'm going to prove myself, I'm going to talk about myself, to let me have this conversation with this organization and see how I can help. All of a sudden, your everything, your body language, your tone, all of that shifts. When you come in with that mindset, then you come across like you're excited to help. Your tone is going to be softer rather than aggressive. You're going to be leaning in and actively listening, which will create that genuine connection and trust with the employer, rather than constantly interrupting them, not being concise with your answers, not giving them opportunity to ask you questions. I mean, imagine if you were sitting at a doctor's office and all the doctor did was speak and just talk about what they do, and they give you no room to ask questions. Would you feel comfortable? Probably not, right? It's got to be a two-way conversation. That's how you need to think of an interview. And of course, having open body language rather than closed body language. So I honestly think that if you come in with that mindset, all of this is going to fall into place and you're not going to feel like you have to force it. So that's why I say, come in with that mindset. 2, building rapport. So here's a little myth. People think that only extroverts are good at interviews. Actually, that is wrong. Have you ever seen an extrovert who comes into the room and they want everyone to look at them and become in the spotlight, and they don't let the other people feel important or present? So that's a myth. Building rapport is not about, talking too much. Building rapport is about showing genuine interest in a person. So I'll give you some examples of things that you can do to build rapport. You want that interviewer to feel like they're the only person in the room when you're speaking to them. You want to focus your attention to them, not look at your phone, not look down, not shuffle, not type in your keyboard. Even taking notes, I actually discourage that when you're in an interview. Because what that does is it doesn't create that connection and gives the impression that you're not paying attention to the person. I mean, you can maybe take a couple of notes here and there, but don't overdo it. I would rather you look at the person, smile, be curious about them, be concise, show admiration. People love flattery. So those are a few things that you could do to build rapport, and you actually do not need to be an extrovert to do these things. The third thing that I wanted to share is identifying the bleeding neck problem, because doctors find the root cause before jumping to a solution. So make sure that when the person asks you the question, you understand the intention behind it, and you also try to figure out what is this organization trying to achieve, so that I ensure that I fill the gaps. The fourth thing, this is very important, implementing structures. So I see a lot of people saying, oh, I'm not the kind of person who follows a script for my interviews. I like winging things. I'm very creative. I don't want to follow any structures. Guess what? Creativity needs structural constraints to thrive. This is something that Matthew McConaughey says, and he's a brilliant creative person. You guys know, have you ever tried baking a cake without a recipe? What happens when you don't follow a system or a structure and you add too much sugar or you add too much liquid? The cake gets messed up. I know this because it happened to me. When you get comfortable and you have that structure ingrained in your brain, that's when you can experiment a little bit, right? So do yourself a favor and have a script for your answers so you feel prepared. Because even Obama didn't wing his speeches. He had a script. He prepared his content and answers before he delivered the speech. And when you do that, that's actually going to reduce your anxiety. So when I'm seeing here some comments around how interviews are stressful, this is going to alleviate the stress a lot. The other thing I wanted to talk about is implementing storytelling during interviews. So have you seen the commercial Red Bull gives you wings? Why do we remember it? Because there's a story behind it. And when you tell a story, what it's going to do is it's going to create a personal connection with the interviewer. Humanity right now is becoming the new premium. And this is why marketers use brand storytelling to connect with audiences and pull at their heartstrings. So you can do the same thing with hiring managers by telling stories about what you've done at work and tying it into what they're asking for, rather than just saying, yeah, this is how I go about it. But if you tell a story that's a proof of success, then it's going to be more believable that you've actually done it. So a great framework that I recommend that Amazon actually uses and encourages job seekers to use is called the STAR framework. I call it SOAR because it's a lot easier to understand, but I even take it further and I call it the hero journey formula. So if you think about every story, right, it's all, whether it's Batman or Lord of the Rings, it's on the premise that there is a hero that's called to adventure, and there's a guide that helps them out, go through these obstacles, the dragons, the enemies, and then once they overcome it, they get a reward. So you, as the guide in your organization, you've helped your teams through many challenges and obstacles to help them, come on the other side and get a reward. So if you think of all of the things you've done and create stories around them following that structure, it's going to help you a lot. and you're going to create a lot of impact. You're going to be more interesting to listen to. The last thing I wanted to talk about is training your public speaking muscle. I remember, a while back, I was so scared of even creating videos or creating content or, let's say doing this presentation today. I would have been extremely anxious. But the more I practiced, the more I felt comfortable. It's kind of like when you learn how to drive, you don't go straight to the highway, right? You go and you drive in the neighborhood streets, you get a little more comfortable, and then you go on the highway. So this is the same thing. It's just like any muscle. The more you practice, the better you become. Just like how actors, practice their lines, they get comfortable with their lines, then they focus on their delivery, they focus on their tone, going in front of the mirror, etc. Those are things that you could do. And of course, having a coach who kind of pinpoints the areas of improvements that you need to make in your speech, maybe things that you're doing that you're not aware of, like nodding your head too much or not making eye contact. So those are important things. So if you follow the trusted advisor mindset, building the rapport, identifying the bleeding neck problem, creating structure and using stories as well as practicing, then what's going to happen is you are going to, convert those interviews into offers and get the salary that you deserve and end up like my clients here. I have a few examples where one of my clients, Amy, she got her consulting offer because she, demonstrated her competencies through compelling stories. And then my other client, Joan, she went into an interview that was for a full-time job, but she wanted an internship since she was going for her master's. And the company was so impressed by her answers that they ended up creating an internship position for her because of how good she was with her, interview answers. So I hope, these techniques have been useful to you. We have a little bit of time, so let me know if you have any questions. I'm open to questions. I'm also going to drop my LinkedIn profile in case you guys want to have a virtual coffee with me and connect or ask me questions around the hero journey formula or any of the other techniques that I presented. So does anyone have any questions? You can drop them in the chat. What is the best way to deal with questions that you don't have an answer to? Can you elaborate a little bit more? What do you mean you don't have an answer to that question? Is it because you don't have the experience? They ask you, like, do you have an experience in a certain area? Some behavioral questions. Okay, can you give me an example of one that you weren't able to answer? Conflict resolution. So what I talked about earlier is when you get a question, a tip that I give is to try to understand the intention behind the question. Why are they asking that question? Maybe this is a leadership role. Maybe this is a team-based role. And why do you think they would ask you about conflict? Because they want to see how you would what your personality style is and how you fit in the team. Are you the kind of person who stands back? Are you the kind of person who's a mediator? What is your personality style? So every single one of you, I'm sure, has had experience with a conflict, right? A conflict situation. So I would tell a story behind that. And of course, when you prepare in advance for those types of questions, it's going to be a lot easier for you to deliver those questions. Because if you're put on the spot and you don't have any stories, like a repository of stories that you can pull from, then you're going to get more nervous and you're going to get stalled. And that's where I say the preparation is extremely important. At the end of the day, these behavioral questions, there's so many, variations. They're not going to vary that much. So having a repository of stories and looking at the types of behavioral questions that they could ask is very important. How to briefly introduce ourselves to actually get an interview. How to impress the recruiters over our job application. Okay, you are asking me the tell me about yourself question. So a lot of people have difficulty answering that question. It's like an elevator pitch. And what I say is actually the intention behind that question, and you guys may not know this, is they're not really necessarily assessing your skills. They want to know if you are passionate about what you do. So I generally tell people when they answer the tell me about yourself question is to think of a moment, a very meaningful moment that caused them to basically get into the career that they wanted to get into. And use storytelling to really basically, amplify what they've done. So one of my clients, I'll give you an example. He was trying to pivot into becoming a Scrum Master. He did not have any Scrum Master knowledge in terms of, real job title. But he had experience in the military coaching teams, and a Scrum Master essentially is a coach. So he said a story around how, he was in the desert with his, team, and he led them into winning this competition, and he coached them through it. And that actually is a story that I helped him with. And he ended up landing offers with that story. He tells me this story has always been the winning story for him. The problem is that when people watch YouTube to practice interviews, right, there's a lot of generic stuff around there, which is so boring. Oh my God. Imagine yourself a hiring manager listening to those answers over and over again. You would get bored. So storytelling allows you to go out of the box. And if you guys need additional help in terms of specific interview, basically questions, you can feel free to jump on a virtual coffee with me. And I can totally, help with that, because everyone's situation is different. And it would be great also to get some context around what kind of role you're going for, so that certain, aspects are highlighted. Tell me about a time when you did something that negatively impacted a person or a team. So that question usually is so again, going back to the intention behind the question, they want to see if you're self-aware. They want to see if you learned from your mistakes. So I'm sure there was a situation where you could have done something differently. So I would look at it from that perspective and highlight what you've learned and use storytelling to answer that. So again, I don't really have a real-time example. That's where I encourage you to definitely, dig deep into creating that repository. And hey, the more interviews you go to, the more you get to practice, and your awareness increases when it comes to knowing what questions are out there. And of course, working with someone to help you with it is extremely important, because as much as we try to go on YouTube and look at examples, the problem is it's like trying to learn an exercise but then you may not be doing it with proper form, and it's hard to know if you're doing it right. It usually takes someone, an external observer, to pinpoint the areas of improvement. I also recommend, not just thinking about the content, but also looking at your delivery. So getting some feedback from others around how you come across when you answer those questions. Any other questions?
Hi, Nada. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. So yeah, I was just looking at the chat. I don't think we have any other questions, unfortunately, but I just wanted to say thank you. Sorry I couldn't be on earlier. I was helping out the other speaker with the technical issue. But yeah, I just want to say thanks again. It's always great to have you at another event. In case anyone doesn't know, Nada has actually spoken, I believe, 3 or 4 of our events so far, and she's always giving great presentations. So thank you again, Nada. It was great to have you.
You're very welcome, and I will drop off my LinkedIn again in case you guys want to chat,
Awesome.
want to get some. I have a little guide that I give people, it's free, on the types of interview questions. So if you reach out to me, I'm happy to share that. Just connect with me with LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share that with you guys.
Awesome. So yeah, I just want to say thank you again. It's always great to have you. And just to let everyone know, so our sessions are done for today. So Nada was our last session. So our panel is actually starting in about 3 or 4 minutes on the main stage. But in the meantime, feel free to check out the other areas of the event, or certainly connect with Nada on LinkedIn or anything like that. And thanks again. It was really great to have you back.
No problem. All right, guys. It was a pleasure speaking, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.